SEC Football Review, October 24th, 2020. There were only 4 SEC games this weekend, but there was still a lot that happened. We'll start in Oxford, Mississippi with a great matchup between Auburn and Ole Miss. Auburn came into this game unranked after they lost a tough one to South Carolina, and they were looking to avoid falling under 500. Ole Miss was also coming off a loss from a game against Arkansas in which their quarterback threw 6 interceptions. This game got off to a slow start with back-to-back punts, but Auburn survived the threat from Ole Miss when Matt Corral threw yet another interception. Auburn marched down the field for a 14-play, 95-yard touchdown drive capped off by a Tank Bigsby 4-yard run. You know Ole Miss can score though, and they immediately matched this drive by Auburn in just 3.5 minutes to knot the game at 7. The offenses weren't done though, as Auburn drove right back down the field and took the lead on another 4-yard run, this one by Bo Nix. Once again, Ole Miss drove down the field, converting a 4th and 5 in the process, and tied the game on a rushing touchdown by Corral. This one will go into the second half, tied at 14. Both teams started the second half by turning the ball over on downs, Auburn because they couldn't handle a punt, and Ole Miss because they refused to kick a field goal. Ole Miss would get the ball back, and powered by a long pass play from Corral would take the lead back on another rushing touchdown by the QB. Auburn was down for the first time today, but the deficit didn't last long. They drove 88 yards in just 4 minutes to tie the game on another rushing touchdown. They got a stop on defense and once again drove down the field to score and take the lead. All they had to do was kick an extra point to go up by 7, and the holder dropped the ball. Ole Miss now had a chance to take the lead, and they did just that. Powered by a strong running game, the Rebels took the lead with under 6 minutes in the game. Auburn would get the ball back after a couple 3-and-outs with under 3 minutes to go. They needed a clutch drive by Bo Nix, and they got it. 6 plays and a minute 14 later, Auburn took the lead. They needed a 2-point conversion, and they got it to go back up by 7. One last chance for Ole Miss. They drove deep into Auburn territory. One last chance, and the QB forgot how to football. Auburn held on to win a tough road game and avoid falling under 500. Next up, we have Alabama and Tennessee. The Crimson Tide were coming off a convincing win over number 3 ranked Georgia, while Tennessee looked to avoid a 3-game losing streak after getting embarrassed at home by Kentucky the week before. The game immediately got off to a bad start for Alabama, as they lost star receiver Jalen Waddle for the season after he was injured on the opening kickoff. They're still a very dangerous team on offense, but Waddle is a special player, a difference maker. The Tide opened up the scoring midway through the first on a 1-yard rushing touchdown by Najee Harris. The Volunteers defense really didn't have an answer for Mac Jones and the Crimson Tide offense in this one. Alabama doubled their lead just 5 minutes later on another 1-yard rushing touchdown, this time by Jones. After a Tennessee field goal, Alabama scored their 3rd straight rushing touchdown to take a 21-3 lead. The Vols tried to keep the game interesting as they marched down the field in less than 2 minutes to score their first touchdown of the game. Alabama wasn't fazed by this. Mac Jones continued to torch the Tennessee defense as he hit Forrestall for 25 yards and Mechie for 45 on the Tide's 4th touchdown drive of the game, which would also end up being their 4th rushing touchdown of the game. The Crimson Tide defense made a big play early in the 3rd quarter when they got a 28-yard scoop-and-score touchdown to go up by 25. That lead would eventually extend to 32 when Harris rushed for his 3rd touchdown of the game, late in the 3rd. Tennessee would score a touchdown the following drive, and Alabama kicked 2 field goals in the 4th as they beat the Volunteers 48-17 to improve to 5-0 this season. The 3rd game of the day was Kentucky and Missouri. As I mentioned, Kentucky is coming off a win in Tennessee, while Missouri won their previous game, a thriller against LSU. The game got off to a slow start, and it was scoreless through 1. Mizzou would strike first early in the 2nd quarter on a 1-yard rushing touchdown by Larry Roundtree. Both teams would kick a field goal after this, which gave Mizzou a 10-3 lead at the half. They would start the second half with the ball and turned it over on downs to end a 21-play drive. Kentucky went 3-and-out, which gave Missouri an opportunity to build on their lead. They did just that, as they scored their 2nd touchdown the same way they did the first. Kentucky responded on the following drive with a 26-yard touchdown to make it a 1-score game, but this was the closest they would get. Missouri added a field goal, and they put the game away with a fumble recovery late in the 4th to cap off a 20-10 win. The final SEC game of the day was South Carolina against LSU. As I mentioned before, South Carolina previously defeated Auburn, while LSU lost to Mizzou. LSU started the game with a very impressive 16-play, 75-yard touchdown drive that took up half of the first quarter. It was finished off by a 1-yard run by TJ Finley, who got the start at quarterback. South Carolina quickly responded on only 3 plays. They got a 45-yard rushing touchdown from Kevin Harris to tie up the game. After a field goal, LSU went up by 10 on a 7-yard passing touchdown to Terrace Marshall Jr. After a South Carolina missed field goal, LSU interception, and a made field goal by South Carolina, LSU doubled their lead on a 51-yard touchdown pass, the second from Finley to Marshall. The lead would reach 21 at the half, as the LSU defense picked off Colin Hill and returned it 45 yards for a touchdown. South Carolina responded quickly to begin the second half, as a 9-play drive in just under 4 minutes ended with a 1-yard rushing touchdown by Kevin Harris. LSU responded in the fastest way possible, as Trey Palmer returned the kickoff for 93 yards for a touchdown to give LSU their 3-touchdown lead back. That lead would grow to 28 on a 4-yard rushing touchdown that immediately followed a South Carolina missed field goal. LSU still wasn't done scoring, as they followed up a defensive stop with another touchdown to make it 52-17. South Carolina would add on one final touchdown halfway through the fourth, as LSU won the game 52-24 in the final SEC game of Week 8.